The shadow of Briarwood. Sarah had always been drawn to the house on Briarwood Lane. It stood alone at the edge of town, surrounded by an overgrown garden and a rusting wrought iron fence. The townspeople whispered about the place, saying it was cursed. But Sarah, a curious and skeptical writer, saw it as a perfect inspiration for her next novel. She decided to rent it for a few weeks, despite the warnings. On her first night in the house, Sarah unpacked her belongings, settling into the cozy but old-fashioned living room. She was immediately struck by a large, ornate mirror hanging above the fireplace. The frame was carved with intricate designs, and the glass, though clean, seemed to have a dark, almost hypnotic depth to it. As the evening turned into night, a storm began to brew outside, casting eerie shadows across the room. Sarah sat by the fireplace, her laptop open on her lap, trying to write. But her eyes kept drifting to the mirror, where she thought she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. Shrugging it off as her imagination, she returned to her writing. Hours passed and the storm intensified. The wind howled and the house creaked in response. Just as Sarah was about to call it a night, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Groaning, she fumbled for her flashlight and candles. She found her way to the kitchen, where she lit a few candles, casting a dim light. Returning to the living room, she felt an unusual chill. The air seemed heavier and the shadows longer. As she sat back down, her eyes were once again drawn to the mirror. This time, she saw a clear reflection of a figure standing behind her. Heart pounding, she spun around, but there was no one there. When she looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone. "Just tired," she muttered to herself, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. She decided to call it a night and headed upstairs to her bedroom. That night, Sarah's sleep was restless. She was plagued by nightmares of being chased through endless dark corridors. She woke up several times, feeling as if someone was watching her. Each time, she looked around the room, but found nothing. The next morning, Sarah found herself drawn back to the mirror. She examined it closely, noticing for the first time that the carvings on the frame seemed to depict scenes of torment and despair. She felt a chill run down her spine and quickly stepped away. Determined to get some writing done, Sarah set up her laptop in a sunny corner of the house, far from the mirror. The day passed uneventfully, and by evening she had made significant progress on her novel. Feeling accomplished, she decided to take a walk in the garden. The overgrown garden was a tangle of thorny bushes and wildflowers. As she wandered, she stumbled upon an old stone well, hidden behind a wall of ivy. Curious, she peered inside, but it was too dark to see anything. A strange feeling of dread washed over her, and she quickly backed away. That night, the power went out again, and the storm returned with a vengeance. Sarah lit her candles and tried to read, but the unease from the previous night lingered. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, she heard a noise coming from the living room. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping. Grabbing her flashlight, she cautiously made her way downstairs. The sound grew louder as she approached the living room. When she entered, she saw the mirror vibrating slightly, as if something were tapping on the other side. Terrified but unable to look away, Sarah stepped closer. The tapping stopped, and for a moment, everything was still. Then a handprint appeared on the inside of the glass, followed by another. They pressed harder and harder as if someone were trying to break through. Sarah stumbled back, tripping over a chair. The handprints vanished, and the mirror returned to its normal state. Shaking, she fled upstairs and locked herself in her bedroom. That night, her dreams were worse than ever. She dreamed of the well in the garden and a shadowy figure climbing out of it, dragging itself towards the house. She woke up in a cold sweat, the feeling of dread almost suffocating. The next morning, Sarah decided she couldn't stay in the house any longer. She packed her things quickly, determined to leave as soon as possible. As she was loading her car, she noticed something in the garden, a trail of muddy footprints leading from the well to the house. Her blood ran cold. She jumped into her car and sped away from Briarwood Lane, vowing never to return. As she glanced in the rearview mirror, she thought she saw a shadowy figure standing at the gate, watching her leave. Sarah never spoke of what she experienced at the house, but her novel, The Shadow of Briarwood, became a bestseller. It told the story of a haunted house with a cursed mirror and a dark entity that could reach out from the other side. Years later, the house on Briarwood Lane still stands, empty and silent, but the mirror remains. Local legends say that on stormy nights, if you listen closely, you can hear the tapping of hands trying to escape.